Hey guys, welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm going to be talking to you about something that is a very highly sought out skill. And I know this because I've hired contractors in this space and I know there's a lot of money to be made. So if you want to pick up a couple of extra bucks on the weekend, stay tuned because I'm going to show you how to make the big bucks. Now there's no debate that data science is a very hot topic right now, and there's a lot of people that are hiring within this space. Now when you or a large organization is trying to better understand their customers, one of the important things to understand is your competitors. What is it that your customers are looking at to go to your competitors and not to you for? And sometimes it's hard to get that information, especially if you're a seller, for example, on Amazon, and you want to understand a little bit more about your competition. Now I can go through and I can scroll through every single one of the listings and I can try to go through all the descriptions, all the prices, all the changes, all the other kind of stuff. But I mean, that's going to become a very cumbersome process. The other thing you can do is you can offer to buy your competitor a drink and ask them to give you your information. Yeah, that's not going to work. Or you can turn to other companies or try to learn the skill yourself. And the skill that I'm talking about is called web scraping. What web scraping really means is it allows you to go to a particular website and get some information off of that website. Whether it be product reviews, whether it be product information, pricing, descriptions, URLs, text, whatever it is. You want to put together some kind of a story around some of the competing products that compete with you. And you want to understand what is it that they're doing that they may be doing a little bit better than you. And the best way to do that is to analyze it through data. Now, web scraping is a very, very valuable skill, but it's what you can do with it once you actually retrieve all the data is where the actual money's at, to be honest with you. I know companies that charge $5,000 to $6,000 per month just to scrape a couple of categories on some of these big websites for companies. So a lot of money to be made. If you're a freelancer, there's plenty of work in this field as well. Now, people who understand this technology can also make a career out of it and work for companies. And there's some pretty big dollars thrown at here, anywhere between $80,000 to $100,000 a year. So you may be asking, well, why isn't everybody doing this? Well, although Python is a very easy language to learn, web scraping still involves a little bit more background, especially in HTML. And you need to understand the different ways that an HTML script is nested in order to really make sense of how web scraping is used and how you can use web scraping. I know when I look for data scientists and hire people for this skill set, this is definitely something that I ask on the interview is, can you web scrape? And if so, give me some examples of how you've done it in the past. And you can generally find out whether they know their stuff or not pretty easily. So in today's tutorial, I want to give you some background on web scraping. Now, the other thing that I'm going to talk to you about in terms of web scraping is some of the legalities around it. Typically speaking, web scraping, from my understanding, isn't illegal. However, there are certain organizations that will put specifically on their website that they do not want you to web scrape their website. It is against their terms and conditions. And I believe there was a case actually in the US where a company was awarded the victory because another company web scraped their website despite saying on their website, please do not web scrape us. So you need to find out whether or not that restriction is on that website or not. You can generally go to their robots.txt file, or it's somewhere written in their terms and conditions that you can find this out. Now, if you do it too much, they can ban your IP, which means that you won't be allowed on that website. Obviously, there's ways around it, but I need to tell you that. So today we're going to be working in a sandbox environment. Now, this website is specifically set up for people to go and practice web scraping. And what we're going to do is we're going to go in there and we're going to scrape some information around certain products. So we're going to look at this fake online bookstore and we're going to get a few attributes around this bookstore. One, we're going to get the title of the book, we're going to get the price of the book, we're going to get the star rating, and then we're also going to scrape for the URL in this book. And if you watch my last video on image to text conversion, you can actually extract the text that's on the cover of the book and put that into your data set as well, if you really want to get creative. We're going to be using a tool called Beautiful Soup that's going to be used with the request library to get the URL information. Then we're going to use Beautiful Soup to parse the information and put it in a way that we can consume it. Finally, we're going to take all that information and dump it into Excel so that you have a nice Excel spreadsheet of how many ever items that you want to scrape, and we're going to be able to web scrape multiple pages as well. So if you're up for the challenge, keep watching. So in today's video, what we're going to do is we're going to be web scraping this bookstore, this online bookstore. It's actually called Bookstores to Scrape. It's a sandbox environment that's actually created for you to go ahead and do some web scraping if you like to practice it. So it's set up to do exactly that. So we're going to be scraping this, and if you look at the format, it's very closely set up to something like how an Amazon or a major online bookstore would be set up. And although these guys are selling books, the practice to scrape products, to scrape other information is the exact same. And the techniques that we're going to go over today are very much similar, if not identical, to the techniques that large organizations would use to start scraping some of this data. And as we talked about, this is a big business. There's a lot of money in web scraping. But more importantly, it's not even just in web scraping in itself. It's the ability to take that data offline, put it in some kind of a consumable format, and then do the analytics against it, which is a very highly sought out skill today. A lot of money involved in that. A lot of people getting paid big dollars for that as well. So this is something you guys can perfect in a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks of effort. If you're really proficient, you can get this down honestly in a couple of hours to even a couple of days and start marketing yourself and making some money online. So it's a great way to do it. So in today's activity, what we're going to do is we're going to go and we're going to try to scrape information off of this main page. And if you look, it's just a whole bunch of random books that are here. So the information I want to get off of here is I want to get the title of the book, I want to get the price, I want to get the star rating, and I also want to scrape the URL wherever this photo is sitting. So if I were to click on this photo, there's a link to this. If I say copy image address and I were to paste that here, this is the link I want to be able to scrape, which is just the address to the actual picture of the book. And this one's kind of scary, to be honest. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a program to do that. But more importantly, I don't want to just scrape the first page. I want to be able to scrape the top, say 50 or even 100 books. So if you look at every single page here, this is a 4x5. So there's 20 books per page here. And what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to get, say, the top 100. So I want to be able to go to page 2, get the books here, page 3, get the books here, and so forth. So we're going to build this web scraping tool together. And I've pre-compiled some of the code, but I'm going to actually go through this. Now, this is not something that I can just put up on GitHub. And the reason is every single web page is going to have its own schema. As a result, the schema is going to differ from web page to web page. As a matter of fact, a lot of companies out there that offer web scraping services actually have something called a maintenance package. And the reason why they have that is because when you look at the page source for this source of how the information is actually stored is going to change sometimes on a periodic basis. And sometimes they do this to throw off, companies that are web scraping, and sometimes they're just updating their code or making things more efficient in the background. So this happens, quite often. And so you need to at least go in my experience, when I used to web scrape products from other companies, I used to be going in and maintaining this stuff sometimes once a month, maybe sometimes more frequent and sometimes less frequent, but on average, probably about once a month. And it was really only about, 2 hours of work per month. So it really wasn't a deal breaker for me, but that's something to be cautious about. All right, so I've got it started here. And what I've done is I've imported a few important libraries. And really the three that we're going to be working with today are going to be Beautiful Soup. Now, Beautiful Soup is your web scraping module, and that's what's going to take all your information, parse the information, and actually scrape through the data. Request is something we're going to use to get the content off of the URL. So I'm going to pass it a URL, and it's going to give me the body. It's going to basically give me all of this stuff here. And this stuff, when we look at it, when you and I look at it, doesn't mean anything to us, but this is how computers read things. And so request is going to allow us to get all of this stuff, and then Beautiful Soup is going to go and put it in a format that we can try to at least do something with it. And then finally, Pandas, I'm going to use that to put it in a data frame and then export it into Excel. So let's walk through what this code is doing. So the first thing I'm saying, the way I want to set this architecture up is I want to be able to scrape multiple pages. So I want to be able to go here and say, scrape pages to scrape. If I put 4, it's going to scrape pages 1 to 4. But I'm going to just start with 1 because I want you to understand what this code is doing right now. So what it's saying is that I'm going to take the URL of that page, and the way, if you look at the URL schema, the way that it's set up, if I go back to the bookstore here, this is the main URL here. And if I were to take a look at the way this is set up, page 1, it says page 1 up here, and when I go down to page 2, the schema stays the same. The only thing that changes is page 2. So what we want to do is we want to build a function that's going to allow us to increment page 1 to page 2 to page 3 and so forth. And so what I've done here is I've said here's the main URL for it. Then I put in a little placeholder here because this is a formatted string, and we're going to call that I. And what I'm saying is we're going to go from I, which is going to start at 1 in this case, that's what I've said, up until the number of pages we're going to scrape. And the reason why I have the +1 here is the way the range function works is if I say, for example, 1, 5, it's going to scrape everything up until 5, but not including 5. So this way I'm ensuring that page 5 also gets scraped as well. And then we're going to say, okay, take all of that information that you have and append it to a list called pages that I've defined up here. So let me print this out and show you what this actually outputs. So now this is going to actually give you the URL for page 1. Now if I were to go here and change this to 2, it's going to input pages 1, 2, and I should have indented that. It's going to do page 1 and page 2. Now if I do 10, it's going to print out all the URLs between 1 and 10. Alright, so that's all this function is doing. This is going to be my way of looking at all the different pages. So really when you think about it, this block of code here is just to increment the page, and that is it. That's the only purpose that I've got for it. It's literally just incrementing through the pages. Alright, so now let's move forward on to the next block of code. So I'm going to get rid of my pages here, and I'm going to say now I want to increment through each and every one of these links over here. So I'm going to say for item in pages, and so each one of these I've designated as an item. Go ahead and fetch all the information that is on this in this URL. So request.getItem, I'm saying store that into page. So all the content that's in page 1, so that would mean this stuff here. All this stuff that's in page 1, store it in the variable that I have as page. And then the second time this goes around, when this is equal to 2, it's going to do the same thing and store everything in item for the second page, and so forth. So it's going to build a list for me essentially of all this stuff that it's all this back-end code that it's putting together. It's going to go through page 1 to 2 all the way up to 5, or whatever we've designated here. 10 is probably too aggressive. I'm just going to keep it down to 1 for now so that we can keep this somewhat targeted, and then after all, I'll expand it out later. But let's go ahead and print to see what this actually shows us. So if I go print, so what this has done now is it's taken all that code that didn't mean a whole lot of stuff before, and it's created into an HTML. So it's taken what we call an HTML parser. So it's taken all that raw data, all that raw text, the unprocessed raw data. It's put some logic against it using an HTML parser. I can even use something called LXML here. It doesn't matter. This one works fine, so I'm going to stick with this. And all I'm saying is take all the text on the page and return it and store that into something called soup. And we're calling the function BS4 because that's what I've given the short. This is the short form name I've given to Beautiful Soup. I just didn't want to type all that out. And so when you print it, this is what you get. And this is everything on page 1. If I were to change this to page 3, this will print out everything from page 1 to page 3. So really this data here now is just meant to go ahead and parse my text. So this first one we used to get the raw data, and the second box here we're using to parse the text. Okay, now so let's go through some of this logic here. The one thing is that when you're typically writing HTML, a lot of this stuff is indented out to sort of give you the relationships between the different nested tags and stuff. There's no indentation whatsoever here. So there's an actual function within Beautiful Soup called prettify. And once I go soup.prettify, what it's going to do is it's going to add the actual nested relationships for me. So it's going to say, for example, in this case, I've got a div class product price. In that I have my price color, I have my price embedded in there. So under my div class I've got my price color and I've got my actual price within this tag as well. And so this is important for us to know, because when I want to say, for example, get the title, I know that I have to look through an H3 tag and I need to be able to pull the title attribute under the tag A. Now this is where I said having a little bit of background in HTML is somewhat important to know, but even if you don't know it, it's this will become intuitive as you practice with it, and this is a great website to practice on, just because it's a sandbox meant for this, and your IP won't get banned if you use it and abuse it. That's just what it's for. In this next block of text, this may become a little bit more clear. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to leave that prettify statement in there. So what this block of text is going to say is it's going to say, I'm looking for title. That's what I want to get. So when I look at my title, it's sitting in something called an H3 tag, which is right here. All right, so now within this H3 tag, I've got an A tag. This is called a nested tag. So this is an A tag within an H3 tag. So this is where the nesting is important, and this is why looking at it this way makes it more easier as well. And these are attributes of the tag. So href is basically the link, which is an attribute of A, and title is an attribute of A as well. So what I'm saying in this case is I'm saying go ahead on this page and search for every single H3 tag you can find, basically across this entire page. Once you do that, get all that text. Let me show you what this is actually going to return. So when I say print that, and I should probably comment this out for now. All right, so I just picked another H3 tag. The other one, the box went away. So anyways, going back to what I was talking about. When I go in and I say iterate for I in soup.find all three, it's going to find every single text block that has H3 up until \H3. And what that's saying essentially is go ahead and isolate all these different areas. And the only text within this area, even though I want to get the title attribute, in this case, the text is the same thing as the title. So it's easy for me to go ahead and just say, all right, for everything in I, go ahead and get the text. So in this block, isolate all the text. And the only thing that's within text is sharp objects here. If you see, this is within a tag, this is within a tag, this is within a tag, and so forth. And so let me show you what that's actually going to output. If I do that for every single one of these, and I'm looping through this, what it's going to do is it's going to go ahead and comment that out, reprint this. It's grabbing all the text in there. So these are all the titles that we wanted. So what it's gone ahead is in that H3 tag, it's actually going in and it's getting all the text that's within that tag, and all the text happens to be the title in this case. And all I want to do is I want to store that to another empty list called titles that I've already called out up here. And so this just means that I'm storing all of these in something called titles.append, and that's it. And so as I'm doing this, I also want to be building a dictionary at the same time. So what I'm going to do down here is I'm going to actually start a dictionary, and I'm going to call it data equals, and I'm going to give it the title, and I'm going to pass it this variable here, which is just titles. All right. So this entire appended list here. So when I print this out now, it's going to give me, and let me get rid of this here. Sorry. It's going to give me a list of all the different titles that were on that first page. And again, if I go ahead and do from page 1 to 2, this is going to double almost, and it's going to give me that many more titles. Okay. So we're going to go back and just do one here. And then when I execute data down here, just to give you an idea, I have a dictionary with my key is going to be title, and my value is going to be a list of titles, which is what we want in this case. All right, and we're going to build on this as we go through. So right now it sounds like we've isolated the title. So the next thing we want to isolate is, let's go after the dollars here. And so if I just bring up this command here again, and I'm going to start deleting some of this stuff. And the reason I'm bringing this up is just easy for us to go ahead and follow this. So the next thing I'm trying to search for all of this is I want to find out where they have the price. So I see the price is actually right there. And for some reason it's in a class called price color. I don't know where that name came from, but that's just what it's been defined as. All right, so in order to isolate that, what we want to do is a very similar statement as to above. And so in this case, what I've said is I've said in this soup file, go ahead and find all of the p tags, because if you see, this is a p tag right here. It's a class called price color, and get the text. Now the one thing to call out is anytime you're going to call a class, you have to have an underscore after it. Otherwise, it just interprets it as a class, and that's not what you want. So you have to put in an underscore. And what this is going to do is it's going to go ahead and get the text, which happens to be this in between the two p tags. So this is my opening p tag, that's my closing p tag, that's my class. The only text in between is this. And then again, we're going to append that to another list called prices. So when I go ahead and print this and show you what this looks like, it's going to give me a list, and I should indent that over actually. It's going to give me a list of all the different prices that were on there. So if we look, $51.77 was the price of the first book. And when I look at the last one, it's $45.17, which is right there. So if I were to now go ahead and show you, just as I go through this, this should now give me 20 prices, which it does. So the first list, and again, I have to go back and indent this back because I've introduced another one. But anyways, $51.77 is the first price on page number 1. And then when I go to page number 2 here, it should end off with $33.63, which it does right there. So that's exactly what we want. All right, so now we have our list of prices. And I'm gonna go ahead and add to this. So I'm gonna add in prices, and we'll call this, I don't know why I keep writing that, prices. So now I have a list of all my titles, and I have to go back and initialize these because we're only gonna do one page again. And so I have a list of my 20 titles, and I have a list of 20 of my prices. Okay, so far it's going in the right direction. It's what we wanted to do. Now the next thing I want to get out of this is a star rating. So if I were to go ahead and uncomment this again, and we'll get rid of this, I want to go and see where my star rating is at. So let's go through this, and you see right here, it's in a P tag. It's called class star rating, but the only problem here is that the actual star rating is within the tag for the class. So this is going to be a bit of a doozy here to get this information out. Fortunately, it's actually not that hard. So let me show you. Now remember I said class is an actual attribute of P. So this is going to be your key, and these are going to be your values. So if you almost treat this like a dictionary, it's going to be quite easy to pull the information out. So let's see how we're going to do that. So for that, I have this block of code right here. And so in this, we're saying, go through the entire thing, search for the P class, search for the class called, search for the P tag, search for the class called star rating. Now in this, I want to go ahead and say, because we want to treat this like a dictionary, so for key and value in the attribute. So this is, because this is an attribute of this tag here, I can go ahead and iterate through these items. And then what I want to do, so let me just show you what this prints out before I go into the next line. I'll go print K and V and just comment this out for a sec. So now it's going to give me a list of all the different keys and the values. And if you notice, the values are actually separated in a list. So this is element 1 of the list. This is element 2. So if you look, what I'm saying is go ahead and pull the second element. Remember, this is 0, this is 1. And so when we bring this stuff back and I get rid of this, and I just go ahead and print star, it's going to give me what I want. 3, 1, and so forth. So the first one has 3 stars and the last one has 2 stars. So let's validate that. 3 stars and 2 stars. And I believe that's what I had said. Yes. Now if we go ahead and add in the second page, what this is going to give me is, where you know that one's 3 stars, the last item on the second page ends with 2 stars. So let's go there. And again, so that's 2 stars right there. So it's doing again what we want it to do. So now that we know that works, let's change this back to 1. And I'm going to go ahead and update my dictionary. And in my dictionary, we're going to add in stars. And my list that I'm appending everything to is called stars as well, just in lowercase. So when I print this out, I've got now my title, my prices, and my stars. All right, so we have almost everything that we're looking for. Now the last thing that we're looking to get, and this one's a little bit tricky, so I saved the best to last for last, is to actually go ahead and get the URL for this picture. And the best part about this is you can use this URL. And if you've seen my tutorial last week on actually converting images to text, you can actually go ahead and take all the text out of all of these pictures and append them as another data frame object as well if you wanted to do more analysis. And there's a lot of companies doing that as well, because what they want to do, they want to see if there's actually authors using keywords within their title or anywhere else on that page as well. But if you think about it from the point of a product, you know, are there certain aspects of that picture that are driving more engagement to the customer? So there's a lot of people looking at that as well. And you can actually take the item that you're looking at, and if it does have words in it, there's also folks doing a sentiment analysis against it and saying, overall, does this point a positive image or does this point a negative image? So there's so many things you can do, and there's a lot of money to be made here. Trust me. We pay some of these contractors, so I know what they're worth. But at the same time, I'm also skilling my team to do this as well. So this is these kind of skills are very, very much in demand right now. All right, so let's go back to our example here and let's try to get our URL from here. And so I'm going to uncomment this as well so we can go ahead and see where the URL is stored. So if I were to go down this, I know that just knowing HTML, that URLs are typically stored in something called an A tag, which is right here. And now this is going to be the link to this particular book on the web page. But what I want to get is I want to get the actual URL to the picture. And that is stored in something called SRC tab. And the SRC tab here, if you will actually have the rest of the URL after the main URL. So the way to read this is this would be bookstoscrape.com/media cache and so forth, and then that's going to lead you to the picture. So we got to figure out how we're going to get that information out of here so that we can put it in our data frame. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and copy this piece of code over, and I'm going to explain to you line by line what's going on here. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at what's going on here. So what I've said is let's define a variable called divs, and in that I want to store all the div tags with the class called image container. So if I were to look down here, this is what I'm looking at right here. So the area of interest for me is going to be right here. And in this area, what I want to do is I want to isolate the div class, which is image container. So everything between the div tags is what I want. So what I'm saying in this line of code is I'm saying, go ahead and isolate everything that has a div tag that also has a class called image container. Okay, so what this little line here is going to do is it's going to capture all of these boxes for every single one of those products. All right, so now that I'm left with this box alone, the next piece that I'm going to look at is to say, okay, now I want to get the thumbnails under all of these different div tags. And so I'm just going to back out of here for a sec and delete this. So I've lost my box. Let me just try it one more time. So now that I have all my little div containers over here, I'm going to say, now I'm making up a variable called thumbs for thumbnails. I'm saying for thumbs in divs. So go ahead and create this new variable called thumbs, which is going to be an iterator. So it's going to say what thumbs 1 is going to be, this is going to be for the first image, thumbs 2 is going to be for the second image, and so forth. Then I'm saying use that, so within this one box, let's say this is for the first image, go ahead and find the image tag with class thumbnail. And so when I go through here, it's going to find the image tag, and it's going to find the class thumbnail. And I'll come back to what this means in a second. But for now, I'm saying go ahead and extract the tags SRC from there. So let me print that out and show you what it means, because this can get confusing, but with practice, I promise you, it becomes a lot easier. When I go print TGS SRC, and I have to uncomment this as well, I keep forgetting to do this, it's going to go ahead and print out everything, all the different URLs that are there in the first 10 pages, and again, if I change this to 2, it's going to do it for the first 20. But we're going to focus on the first 10, or the first page for now. So then what I'm saying here in this next case is I'm saying go ahead and append http bookstoscrape.com in front of this. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and print URLs and show you what that does. And so what it's done is it's gone ahead and taken HTTP and added that in front of it, but I have a problem. I'm left with that .. in every single one of these, because that's just how the text was extracted. It was extracted as a text. So the next line is going to fix that. I'm going to say go through all of these URLs, wherever you find .. replace that with nothing. And so when I go ahead and print this line, you'll see it's gotten rid of this, and I can actually print this, and it'll take me to the actual image link for whatever book I'm looking at, which is cool. And then finally, I'm going to go ahead and store that in another string up here that I've defined as my URL strings. Okay, and so now we're going to go ahead and append this to the dictionary as well. And so I'm going to go ahead here and say URLs. And now when I go ahead and print this out, it's going to give me my first 10 titles, my first 10 prices, my first 10 stars, and my first 10 URLs. And so now the last piece is really the easiest part, and that is putting this into a data frame. And the reason why I picked to put this in a dictionary is it's just so much easier to convert this into a data frame. And to do that, I'm just going to call a function called pd.dataframe, which is part of pandas. Remember, pandas we called pd over here. And I'm going to call a method in there called data frames. I'm going to take this data and I'm going to pass it the value data, because that's what we called our dictionary. If I call this dictionary, I would say data is equal to dictionary, for example. And then I'm going to reset my index, but I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. And so if I print this out, it's going to give me everything in a nice clean format here. So I got my title, my prices, my star rating, and the URL. And so what I like to always do is I like to reset my index, because I want to know that I have 20 books, not 19. So I just want to go back up here and redefine my index and say df.index plus equals 1. And that just means increment my index by 1. And so now I know that I have book 1 all the way to book 20. So if I want to get my top 100 books, so we're going to get rid of this, just so we don't have such a cluttered screen up, and we'll rerun this, and I'll get rid of this print command here as well. Now I've got a function that basically takes whatever number of pages I choose. So now we're going to go ahead and say 5. And what I should be seeing at the bottom of this data frame is 100, because I want to get 100 items. So when I print this, and just watch how quick this runs. It's crazy how quickly this stuff runs. And I print it, and now I have 100 entries that are scraped all the way from page 1 to 100. Can you imagine manually collecting that data? Like, that would be a nightmare. And so this is where data frames become amazingly great to work with. And then the last piece I want to do is I want to go ahead and export this into an Excel file. And that again is also very easy to do. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder on my desktop. I actually have already done it, and it's called bookstore WS, and I'm going to say print it out as output.xls. And really, to create this Excel file, it's one single method. It's called df2 Excel, and that's part of your pandas framework as well. And this is going to write everything to Excel. So essentially, it's going to write it into this file right here. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and execute this, and I'm going to drag this over, and now it's going to show that I have 100 entries with all this text that I've been able to mine. And the ability to go ahead and do analysis against this, or even put this into some kind of an internal database, or whatever information you want to do with this, is extremely powerful. And that's why web scraping combined with data science and analytics is such a hot thing right now, and there's a lot of people looking for this skill set. So if you're, say for example, an Amazon FBA seller and you want to get information on your competition, there's companies out there, I won't name them today, but there are companies out there that are using literally the exact same method and charging you a couple of $100s to use their service. There's some that are charging you a monthly fee, and I mean, you can do this honestly in a couple of hours just by understanding the URL schema for it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to go ahead and say print the first 10 pages, and that should give us 200 entries. And now I'm just going to go ahead here and hit cell run all, and it should populate the Excel file somewhere here in a second. So there it is. So let's go ahead and open it, and this should now populate 200 rows, and it did. So again, it was that simple. So now you can do further analysis against this. Even within pandas, you can also check to see, if there's a trend between prices and star rating, or if there's certain text within an image that drive a higher star rating, or anything. I'm just making this stuff up right now, but there's so many things you can do. So that was a glimpse into web scraping. I'm really hoping you enjoyed that tutorial. It was fun for me to do this. Again, go ahead and check out books.toscrape.com. This is again a sandbox for you to go ahead and play around in, and you can build something similar to this. Once you've built it, put it down in the comments. Let me see what you've done. Maybe you've pulled out different fields. Even see if you can go back. So my challenge to you is to go back to my last week tutorial and try to go ahead and extract every single one of these URLs. Write a function that's going to loop through every single one of these URLs and append right next to this another column called converted text or something, whatever you want to call it, that's going to give me all the text that are within these pictures. So if you really want to have some fun with this, try that out. But that, my friends, is web scraping in a nutshell. Alright guys, I really hope you enjoyed that video around web scraping. Again, this is a very, very valuable skill set to have, essential for a developer, especially in this day and age, and it's a very sought out skill. I am going to take the code, even though you can't use the code per se on other websites. I'm going to take this code that I developed, I'm going to put it on GitHub for you, so you can go ahead and mess around with the code and try to make sense of it for yourself. Play around with it, do whatever you need to do, but the most important thing is just use it to learn. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe, and I will see you the next time. Take care.